The late afternoon sun bled across the cobblestones of the piazza, casting long skeletal shadows from the ancient statues. Serafina clutched her worn satchel, the scent of lavender and starch from her hotel uniform clinging to her like a second skin. It was the in-between time, the quiet breath before the city's vibrant evening pulse began. That's when she saw him. A small boy, no older than 7, with hair as black as a raven's wing and eyes the color of stormy seas, pressed against the cold marble of a fountain. 2 men, built like brick walls in ill-fitting suits, were closing in on him. They moved with a predator's lazy confidence, their smiles thin and cruel. The child's defiance was a fragile flame in the face of their hulking menace. He didn't cry, but his small fists were clenched, his jaw set. Something primal and fiercely protective surged through Serafina. She didn't know the boy, she didn't know the men, but she knew injustice when she saw it. Dropping her bag, she moved, her steps quick and determined. She placed herself between the child and the thugs, her chin lifted. "Leave him alone," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. One of the men sneered, revealing a gold tooth. "This ain't your business, Principessa." Scram, but Serafina stood her ground. "He's just a child," she reached back without looking, her hand finding the boy's small, trembling one. He gripped her fingers with surprising strength. The second man took a step forward, his hand reaching out. "The boss wants the boy. We ain't leaving without him." Suddenly, the air grew heavy, charged with an unspoken authority. A long black sedan had purred to a stop at the edge of the piazza, silent as a panther. The door opened. The man who emerged was not large like his thugs, but he commanded the space with an intensity that stole the air from Serafina's lungs. He was impossibly handsome, carved from shadow and granite, his bespoke pinstripe suit a stark contrast to the gritty surroundings. His eyes, the same stormy gray as the boy's, locked onto the scene with chilling precision. The thugs froze, their bravado evaporating like mist. "What?" The man's voice was a low, dangerous rumble like distant thunder. "Is going on here?" The gold-toothed man stammered. "Boss, we were just—" Alessandro the Shadow King Falcone ignored him. His gaze swept over his son, Leo, a flicker of raw, paternal fear crossing his features before being encased in ice once more. He saw the boy's small hand locked in the hand of a woman in a simple maid's uniform. His eyes traveled up her arm, to her defiant shoulders, to her face. Her eyes, the color of warm honey, met his without flinching. They held not just fear, but a fiery indignation that intrigued him as much as it irritated him. He took a slow, deliberate step forward. "Leo," he commanded softly. The boy released Serafina's hand and ran to his father, burying his face in the expensive wool of his trousers. Alessandro's hand rested on his son's head, a gesture of absolute possession. His storm-gray eyes returned to Serafina. "And who are you?" She swallowed, the adrenaline beginning to fade, leaving a tremor in its wake. "My name is Serafina." "Serafina?" he repeated, the name rolling off his tongue like a caress and a threat. "You have interfered in Falcone family business." He saw the confusion and then the dawning horror in her eyes as the name registered. Everyone in this city knew the name Falcone. It was a name whispered with fear and reverence. He had expected her to cower. She didn't. She lifted her chin higher. "I saw 2 bullies threatening a child. I don't care what family name they hide behind." A ghost of a smile touched Alessandro's lips. A dangerous, beautiful thing. This was unexpected. This was interesting. He couldn't leave a loose end. A civilian who had seen a rival faction's attempt on his son. He couldn't risk her talking. But killing her felt wasteful. He made a decision in the space of a heartbeat. "You have a new job," he stated, not asked. "You will come with me. You will be Leo's governess. You protected him once. You will continue to do so." Serafina's world tilted on its axis. I can't. I have a job. A life." Alessandro's gaze hardened. "You have what I give you," he said, his voice dropping to a velvet whisper that promised violence. "Your life is now mine." And just like that, Serafina was swept from her ordinary world into the heart of the Falcone Empire. A sprawling villa on the cliffs overlooking the sea. It was a palace of marble floors, priceless art, and suffocating silence. A gilded cage. She was given silk dresses to replace her uniform, but they felt like costumes. Her only solace was Leo. The boy, so quiet and watchful in his father's presence, slowly opened up to her. He showed her his secret hiding places in the vast gardens, told her stories his mother used to tell him, and clung to her with a desperation that broke her heart. She learned he was motherless, that his father's world was one of whispered conversations behind closed doors, and the constant unnerving presence of armed guards. She saw the loneliness in the child that mirrored the vast emptiness in the father's eyes. Her relationship with Alessandro was a battle of wills. He was the unmovable object, the king of this dark domain. She was the irresistible force of defiance. "You should eat, Signor Falcone," she'd say, finding him in his study late at night, a glass of amber liquid in his hand, the ghosts of his violent life swimming in his eyes. "A king cannot rule on an empty stomach." He would look up, his gaze intense, a mixture of annoyance and fascination. "You forget your place, Serafina." "My place is to care for your son," she'd retort, her hands on her hips. "And a boy needs his father, not a shadow who haunts the halls at night." He watched her constantly. He observed her gentle patience with Leo, the way she could coax a rare laugh from the boy. He saw the way she tended to the roses in the garden, her touch careful and nurturing, unafraid of the thorns. He hadn't allowed such softness in his life since his wife's betrayal, a wound that still festered beneath his cold exterior. She had been beautiful, but her heart had been poison. This woman, this maid, she was different. Her fire wasn't for show. It was the pure, unyielding flame of her spirit. One evening, a storm raged outside, mirroring the turmoil in the house. A deal had gone wrong, blood had been spilled, and the tension was a physical presence. Alessandro was in his study, his knuckles bruised and bloody from some unseen altercation. Serafina entered quietly, a tray with a bowl of warm soup and bread in her hands. She set it down on his desk, her eyes falling to his injured hand. Without a word, she retrieved the first aid kit from a nearby cabinet. He watched her, his body rigid, as she gently took his hand. Her touch was warm, her fingers surprisingly steady as she cleaned the cuts. "You think you can fix everything with a kind touch and a bowl of soup?" he rasped, his voice raw. She met his gaze, her own eyes soft with an empathy he didn't deserve. "No," she whispered. "But it's a start." He could smell the faint scent of lavender on her skin, a stark contrast to the gunpowder and iron that usually filled his world. He felt the calluses on her fingertips, the evidence of a life of honest work. He felt an ache in his chest, a deep, painful craving for the purity she represented. It was a weakness, a fatal, damnable weakness. The antagonist, Alessandro's cousin Marco Verratti, saw it all. He watched from the shadows of the long corridors, his eyes narrowed with venomous jealousy. He saw the way Alessandro's gaze followed the maid, the slight softening of his ironclad defenses. Marco, the treacherous underboss, had long coveted the Falcone throne. He had been waiting for a chink in Alessandro's armor, and he had found it. It was a woman with honey-colored eyes and a spine of steel. A weakness, Marco thought with a cruel smile, was a weapon in the right hands. The storm outside the villa intensified, waves crashing against the cliffs below. A clap of thunder, loud as a cannon blast, shook the house. From upstairs came a terrified cry. "Leo," they both said at once. They moved in unison, racing up the grand staircase and down the hall to the boy's room. They found him sitting bolt upright in his bed, his small body trembling, tears streaming down his face. Serafina reached him first, gathering him into her arms, murmuring soft words of comfort in Italian, her voice a soothing balm against the raging storm. Alessandro stood in the doorway, a silent, powerful sentinel. He watched her, this woman who had stumbled into his life, calm his son with a tenderness he himself was incapable of showing. In the dim light from the hallway, her hair was a dark halo around her face. As she settled Leo back against the pillows, her hand still stroking his hair, her gaze met Alessandro's across the room. The air crackled, thick with unspoken emotions. He walked to the bed, his presence filling the space. He sat on the edge, his knee brushing against hers. Their hands lay inches apart on the silken duvet. Slowly, deliberately, he reached out, his fingers covering hers. The contact was a jolt, a spark of lightning in the quiet room. Her skin was soft, warm, real. He looked at her, truly looked at her, and saw not a maid, not a captive, but the woman who held his son's heart, and was swiftly, terrifyingly capturing his. "You are a dangerous woman, Passerato," he murmured, his voice a low, gravelly whisper that was for her alone. A little sparrow he'd called her. Fragile thing. But he knew better. Sparrows were resilient. They were survivors. And this one had flown straight into the heart of the storm and refused to be broken. Their connection, forged in that shared moment of vulnerability, began to grow in the stolen quiet of the night. They found themselves in the vast library after Leo was asleep, the scent of old paper and leather a sanctuary from the world outside. He would speak of the burdens of his name, the weight of the crown he never asked for but was born to wear. She in turn spoke of her simple life, of her dreams of a small garden and a quiet home, things that seemed like a fantasy in his world of violence and power. One evening they walked through the moonlit rose garden. The silver light cast his sharp features in a softer glow. He stopped before a bush of deep crimson roses, their petals like velvet. "My mother planted these," he said, his voice laced with a rare nostalgia. "She said the thorns are necessary. They protect the beauty within." He reached out and brushed a finger against a velvety petal, then against a sharp thorn. "I have become all thorns, Serafina. To protect what little beauty is left." "I don't believe that," she said softly, her gaze unwavering. "I have seen the man who comforts his son after a nightmare. I have seen the man who carries the weight of his entire family. The thorns are your armor, Alessandro. But armor can be removed." His loyal consigliere Luca, a man with weary eyes that had seen too much, watched the budding romance with growing concern. "Boss," he warned one afternoon in the study, his voice low. "She is a good woman. But she is your weakness. Marco sees it. He will use her to destroy you." Alessandro's jaw tightened. "I am aware of the risks." "Are you?" Luca pressed. "Love is worse than a hit, Alessandro. You never see the bullet coming." While Alessandro was distracted by the war in his own heart, Marco made his move. He orchestrated a strike against a Falcone warehouse, making it look like the work of their chief rivals, the Bellini family. He planted whispers among the men, rumors that their Don was distracted, that a common maid had clouded his judgment. He fanned the flames of discontent, positioning himself as the strong, focused alternative. He needed a full-scale war, a baptism of fire from which he would emerge as the new king. The tension in the villa stretched to a breaking point. Every shared glance, every accidental touch, was a promise and a torment. One night, Alessandro found Serafina on the balcony of her room, staring out at the turbulent sea. He came to stand beside her, the silence between them thick with everything they couldn't say. "This world will destroy you," he said, his voice rough with an emotion he couldn't name. "You should have run when you had the chance." "And leave Leo?" she asked, turning to face him. "Leave you?" The admission hung in the air between them. His control, forged in years of blood and discipline, finally shattered. In 2 long strides he was before her, his hands framing her face, his thumbs stroking her cheekbones. "You have bewitched me, Serafina," he confessed, his voice a raw, desperate groan. "You have become the one thing more dangerous to me than a bullet." He crushed his lips to hers. It was not a gentle kiss. It was a kiss of desperation, of a drowning man finding air, of a king surrendering his kingdom. It was all his rage, his loneliness, his fear, and his sliver of hope poured into one devastating act. Serafina met his passion with her own, her arms wrapping around his neck, pulling him closer, anchoring him. In that moment on that storm-swept balcony they were not a Don and a Maid. They were just a man and a woman, finding a desperate sanctuary in each other. But from the shadows of the garden below, a lens flashed. Marco smiled. He had his weapon. The photograph, artfully blurred and anonymous, circulated through the underworld like a virus. The whisper became a roar. The Shadow King had gone soft, besotted with an unknown woman while his empire burned. The Bellini family, emboldened by Marco's provocations and the rumors of Alessandro's weakness, launched a full-scale assault. The city became a war zone. Car bombs echoed in the night, and the scent of cordite hung heavy in the air. Alessandro was forced to become the man he had been trying to escape. The cold, ruthless Don returned, his eyes chips of ice, his heart encased in steel. He pushed Serafina away, the coldness in his voice a blade to her heart. This is my world, Serafina. A world of monsters. You do not belong here. Luca will take you away somewhere safe. No, she pleaded, her heart breaking. I'm not leaving you. I'm not leaving Leo. You have no choice, he roared, the sound echoing in the marble hall. I am doing this to protect you. Do you think I could live with myself if they used you to get to me? If your blood was on my hands? He turned his back on her, a gesture of finality that was more painful than any physical blow. Heartbroken but unbowed, Serafina watched him retreat into the shadows of his kingship. She could flee, accept the escape he offered her. Or she could fight. Not with guns or knives, but with the one weapon she possessed that no one else in this dark world did. Her heart, and the emotional insight it gave her. She looked at the fear in Leo's eyes. She saw the torment behind Alessandro's rage. And she saw the smug, predatory smile that never quite left Marco's face. Something was wrong. The attacks felt staged. Too perfect. Too convenient. She remembered the thugs in the piazza, how they had seemed more like actors than genuine kidnappers. What if that day hadn't been a rival family's attempt at all? What if it was the first move in a much deadlier game? With a newfound resolve, she sought out Luca. I need your help, she said, her voice firm. I don't think the Bellinis are entirely to blame. I think the traitor is inside this house. Luca, ever loyal to his Don but wise enough to see the truth in her impassioned plea, reluctantly agreed to help her investigate. Together they pieced it together. A secret phone, financial records showing large, untraceable payments, a hushed conversation Luca had overheard between Marco and a known Bellini turncoat. The evidence was damning. Marco had orchestrated everything, from the initial incident in the piazza designed to create chaos and test Alessandro's defenses, to the escalating war meant to dethrone him. Serafina knew she had to get the proof to Alessandro. She found him in the war room, a map of the city spread before him, his face grim. The capos were gathered, their voices a low murmur of strategy and violence. Marco was there, looking every bit the loyal cousin, offering counsel that she now knew was poison. She walked into the room holding a ledger. The room fell silent. All eyes turned to her. Alessandro, she said, her voice clear and strong. You are fighting the wrong enemy, Marco sneered. The Don is busy, girl. Go back to the boy. The traitor isn't outside these walls, she continued, her eyes locked on Alessandro's. He is standing in this room. She laid the ledger on the table, its pages detailing Marco's treachery. As Alessandro's eyes scanned the proof, the color drained from Marco's face. Exposed, he did the only thing a cornered rat could do. He drew a pistol, grabbing Leo, who had followed Serafina into the room, and held the boy in front of him as a shield. No one moves. Marco shrieked, his composure shattering. The family is mine now. The room erupted in chaos, but Alessandro's voice cut through it like a whip crack. Stand down. His eyes were on Leo, but he was listening to Serafina. He trusted her. He saw the plan in her eyes. Serafina took a step forward, her hands raised placatingly. Marco, let him go, she said, her voice gentle, drawing his attention. Leo has nothing to do with this. As Marco's eyes fixated on her, Alessandro moved. He was a blur of lethal grace, a shadow brought to life. A single muffled shot echoed in the vast room. Marco crumpled to the floor, a crimson rose blooming on his chest. Leo was safe, scooped into his father's arms. Alessandro stood before his men, his son held tight against him, his gaze finding Serafina's across the room. The war was over. The traitor was dead. He looked at the woman who had walked into his darkness and shown him the light, the woman who had saved his son, and saved him from himself. He was still a king, but his kingdom was no longer made of shadows. It was made of love and loyalty. He walked to her, never taking his eyes from hers. In front of all his men, he gently touched her face. Ho finito di combatterlo, he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. I'm done fighting it. You are not my weakness, Serafina. You are my strength. My queen. My Regina. The city healed. And so did the Falcone family. The villa, once a place of silence and fear, was now filled with the sound of Leo's laughter. Alessandro ruled with a strength tempered by compassion, A king who had learned the power of vulnerability. The final scene finds them in the rose garden. The setting sun painting the sky in hues of orange and violet. Leo is chasing butterflies, his laughter a sweet melody. Alessandro stands with his arm around Serafina, watching their son. He leans down and presses a kiss to her temple. The thorns are still there, he murmurs against her hair. But now they protect us all. He holds her tighter. A man who found his salvation in the fierce heart of an ordinary woman. Can a heart forged in darkness and violence truly learn to live in the light? Can a love born from captivity and danger ever truly be free? The story of the Shadow King and his Sparrow Queen suggests it can. What do you think? Let me know in the comments if you believe in a love that can conquer all, even the shadows of the Mafia. Share this story if you were swept away by their epic romance, and tell me about the greatest love story you've ever known.